Hello, and thank you for joining us for Uniquely Rural, Creating Effective Campaign Strategies About Sexual Assault. This is part of the Rural Technical Assistance Project funded by the Office on Violence Against Women, U.S. Department of Justice. And just to check in, I want to make sure that everyone knows that we need to be dialed in with the audio code and logged on to the webinar portion of today's presentation to access everything. So before we begin, I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping items. First, note that this webinar will be recorded and transcribed. We do have participants muted for the presentation portion of the webinar, but lines will be unmuted at the end of the presentation when we have a question and answer period. Also note that all of the webinar-related materials are October, so be looking for those a little later, and we'll send those out. Just to go over how to ask questions throughout the presentation, you'll see that on the top middle of your screen there's a question and answer tab. You can open that tab at any time to enter a question. If you have a specific thought, idea, something you'd like to share, you can click that and send that throughout the presentation. We'll also have some time at the end to revisit some questions if you have things related to content or things you'd like to share. So please feel free to use that tab throughout. And if at any point in time you have some technical problems or can't access something, have problems hearing, please feel free to use the question and answer tab or call 1-877-739-3895 for assistance. So to give you an overview of how we're going to spend the next hour and a half, let's take a look at the agenda. We're going to start with an overview and then move on to introductions and then right into components of effective campaigns. Then we'll be focusing on sharing the campaign tools that we've developed and creative strategies for implementation. And we hope to have the last 20 minutes or so left for your questions and thoughts at the end. So for any of you who are just joining, just to go over again, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the question and answer tab. Or you can feel free to jot down questions throughout the presentation and we can come back to them at the end during the question and answer period. And also, for any technical assistance questions or problems, please call 1-877-739-3895 or use that question and answer tab. So to start, let's take just a few minutes to learn about who's presenting on the call today. My name is Kelly Wilt, and I'm the training specialist with the NSVRC. We hope that we've gotten to meet most of you, but we know there are some new rural grantees. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with us, just want to take a couple minutes to tell you about those of us who are presenting. Again, my name is Kelly, and my background includes working with topics of education, advocacy, and social change. And in my current role as a training specialist with the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, I provide training, technical assistance, and curriculum development to a variety of partners within the anti-sexual violence movement. We also have Sally Lasky, Director of Special Projects with the NSVRC. She's worked with social change at local, state, and national levels for over 2 decades. She also has experience as an advocate, prevention educator, trainer, and researcher, as well as a direct services coordinator for the Sexual Harassment and Rape Prevention Program at the University of New Hampshire. At the NSVRC, she provides technical assistance and training around the country on prevention, sustainability, and multidisciplinary response to sexual assault. And we also have Elizabeth Nieves. She is the Sexual Trauma Action Team Coordinator for Family Violence and Rape Crisis Services in Chatham, North Carolina. Elizabeth was involved in the testing of the campaign messages for the Rural PSA project and will share about the strategic development of campaign tools and more specifically her agency's plans for using the developed materials in her community. So we are here today to discuss the unique characteristics of comprehensive campaigns about sexual violence in rural communities. A little later, we'll share with you the newly developed campaign tools that we're super excited about. The NSVRC has developed these for use by rural grantees, and we'll have some more specific information on how to strategically embark on this process. But in a moment, I'd like you to consider both broadly about your community as a whole and maybe even more specifically about some populations in your community. How do we effectively reach more people in our communities? And what do you know about your community that influences these methods of outreach? So throughout the presentation, I just hope you'll think about these questions as there'll be a common thread throughout the discussion. And I hope that we're able to answer these questions. How do we effectively reach more people in our community? I hope we get at this from a broad perspective today as we explore the set of campaign tools that we develop for rural communities, with the caveat in mind that we know that each rural community is different and that knowing your own community is an integral part of this process. I think it might be helpful to start by discussing some of the aspects that make an effective campaign. Kelly Oddie, President of Action Consulting and former Executive Director of a Rape Crisis and Domestic Violence Center located in Tallahassee, Florida, presented at a past Just Rural conference and introduced the concept of the role of 27. And I think this is something valuable to think about as we go through today's presentation. Some of you may be familiar with this idea and others not. So I'm hoping we can do a quick poll to see what we think the rule of 27 might be. So take a few seconds and fill out what you think the rule of 27 is. Is it that you need buy-in from at least 27 people for a campaign to be effective? That people must hear your message at least 27 times to be effective? Or effective campaigns have at least 27 critical components? For responding, we're seeing them come in now, and it looks like answer number 2 is taking the lead. Okay, and answer 2 is correct. People must hear your message at least 27 times to be effective. And I apologize, I just note there's a typo in there. People must hear your message. The rule of 27 is that your message, your name, your mission, your logo, services, whatever it must be in front of people at least 27 times in order for them to know what you stand for and what services you are offering. So as we're talking about creating an effective campaign or you're thinking about effective outreach, you might want to keep this concept in mind. 27 times. It seems like a lot, but it's important to realize that in order for recognition and in order for people to be able to really get what you're about, they need to see it several times. We have organized some of the aspects of what makes a campaign effective into 9 steps of action that I'd like to touch on briefly. And while we'll be spending the next 20 minutes or so talking about these steps in the context of this campaign, this process can be beneficial when engaging in almost any campaign, and your familiarity with the process may put you one step ahead when it comes to starting other campaigns. Most notably, I'm thinking about our National Sexual Awareness Month campaign in April. So we're hoping these steps can help you learn a little bit more about how we went through our process, but also how you can apply it to your own campaign. So step 1, we need to identify our audiences. we need to have a clear understanding of who we're trying to reach when developing a campaign. In our case, we knew that rural communities were our audience, yet we also identified potential differences within this audience set. So the better you know your audience and their needs, the more likely you are to have a campaign that succeeds in meeting these needs. And once you have identified your target audience, you need to outline clear objectives. So the second step is creating objectives. Do you want to educate, call for action, change attitudes? These are some examples. And if you're hoping to change attitudes or beliefs, what is it that you want the community to change the way that they see? In the case of our project, we identified 3 main objectives for the campaign. We wanted our audience to know that sexual violence is a serious problem in their community, to be willing to initiate a conversation about sexual violence, and to model this leadership for others. And third, we wanted to know where to go. We wanted people to know where to go in the community to find more information on sexual violence and how they could get involved. So these are our 3 objectives, but it's important to note that these need to be unique to your community and representative of the needs that you've identified. The third step is to devise strategies. So once you have objectives, you need to figure out how you'll accomplish them. The strategies should resonate with your audience and be feasible for your organization's resources and time frame. For our rural PSA project, we joined forces with a local marketing and design firm to help with creating these strategies. We knew we wanted a multi-component campaign and also wanted to ensure a few specific things. First, we wanted to make sure that the end results were relevant and useful for a wide range of rural communities. Our second was that our strategies were aligned with the research findings about popular use of media in rural communities and also in line with popular opinions about sexual violence in these communities. Third, we wanted to make sure that the process and products worked within our budget. Obviously, that's an important piece. We need to make sure that we work within the resources that we have. So as you're thinking about these strategies, do a quick check-in. We're hoping you can use the question and answer tab or just think to yourself whatever you're most comfortable with. Think about how you have brought attention to a project, campaign, or promotion in your community. You know, what strategies have you used? How has it worked? Again, feel free to just think about it, or if you have anything you want to share, feel free to use the question and answer tab, and we'll be checking these throughout the presentation and revisiting later. The fourth step of action is to talk to your community. So you want to talk with your audience. This requires checking in with your target audience to verify that the messages you're hoping to use are appropriate. This can be done in numerous ways, some including surveys or focus groups. We chose to conduct focus groups organized by select rural centers to learn the reactions of community members to a variety of messages that we wanted to test. We also used research compiled by Frameworks Institute on public perceptions of sexual violence to influence the types of messages that we thought might be most appropriate. The fifth step is to develop messages. And the messages developed should be based on the goals and objectives that you previously identified. They should be representative of findings from meeting with the target audience. And these should be about 3 to 5 facts or messages to your audience. In our process of developing our messages, we used the feedback and research gathered from our test sites to finalize our messaging choices. And we found that this stage was pretty critical because it was necessary that we analyzed feedback from the testing sites related to concepts, choice of language, and where we developed our final slogans, calls to action, and graphics.
And Suzanne, thank you for your question. We will have a transcript of the webinar as well as a whole entire online collection to give some more feedback on how we can be more strategic in our campaign implementation. We'll also be captioning the webinar as well. So we'll have all of those materials available in October, as Kelly said.
Thank you, Sally. Sixth stage in the campaign process is where we really start to get creative. At this time, the campaign comes to life with the development of graphics, posters, brochures, radio spots, television ads. The possibilities really are endless. The exact components of your campaign should be dictated by your analysis of your audience, your objectives, and your resources. So at this time, you should be getting creative both in the development process and with your resources. Collaborating with partners or local businesses and organizations that may be willing to help develop or deliver your messages is a critical part of this process. The relationships and potential partnerships should be identified as far in advance as possible for optimal use. In our process, we worked collaboratively with our design firm to create the campaign tools. And this really involved open communication and sharing throughout the process to ensure that we were effective and deadlines.
Kelly, would you mind just saying what step 5 is again? One of our participants didn't hear that. Just briefly give them the...
Oh, sure. Step 5 was to develop the messages. And these messages should be based on the goals and objectives that you identified, and they should be representative of the findings from meeting with your target audience. Usually these look like 3 to 5 messages or facts that you want to make sure that your audience really grasps. And this is a really critical stage because you want to make sure that you have your message on target with what's going to best resonate with your audience, and it is important for how you design your final items.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, to get back to getting creative, as I think where I left off was that getting creative really involves everything. It can be essentially the sky is the limit. You want to think about getting creative and meeting your goals as well as your partnerships. So for an example, I'm thinking it might be useful for you to think about this in terms of, in the past, how have you been able to get creative when thinking about the people that you work with? So maybe think, what type of partnerships might you have embarked on in the past that maybe were out of the ordinary or you didn't expect? I know from chatting with someone internally here, we were talking about some of our campaign items that we were developing, and not to let the cat out of the bag, but one of the items is a window cling that is related to our, that was developed for our campaign. And she was mentioning a unique partnership that she thought about was, what about working with local auto dealers or mechanics that might be willing to have these window clings in their dealerships or their garages to be able to give to potential people in the community that might be interested in putting them on their cars. So that was something that I before, but when she said it, I thought that's a cool idea. If you could get somebody on board, you know, a mechanic or an auto dealer might not be someone you generally think about partnering with for a campaign that talks about sexual assault, but I thought it was a cool thing. So if you've done anything like that in the past or have any ideas for campaigns, maybe jot those down, think about those. Feel free to share them with the question and answer tab, but those are the types of things that we want you to think about with getting creative, that your resources certainly will dictate how you can be creative, but be creative in how you think about your resources. The 7th step is to take the campaign materials back to your audience, your community, for one last review. This ensures that the messages you've created really resonate with your audience, and it's essentially a double check to make sure that you're on mark with what you've developed. And this should provide you with an opportunity to tweak anything that may need adjustment. So things should be in pretty final stage at this point, with the ability to do some edits if your community should say, well, that language isn't necessarily what works best with us, or maybe that image could be changed a little bit. But this is making sure that it works with your community and that it will resonate well. Step 8 8 is where you begin to implement strategically. And this will be a larger part of today's presentation. But for the time being, to just briefly go over this, this is what where you really start to think critically about how you will use your campaign materials. And this may require creating an implementation plan that is based on your internal and external resources. And it should really include consideration of things such as what kind of training and time might be required of staff as pertaining to the training, what avenues of distribution of campaign materials make the most sense for your resources, what type of support will be necessary to manage the response to the campaign and or the maintenance of the campaign. So these are the types of questions that you'll want to consider and should be a part of this implementation plan that really is specific to your own agency and your resources. In the context of our campaign that we developed, this is really where centers can consider how these materials will fit within your communities and your outreach plans or other projects and campaigns that you're already involved in. We know that sometimes it seems easiest to have a one-size-fits-all campaign, but we also know that these aren't necessarily the most effective. So really figuring out how this would work within your goals and your resources or how you might be able to adapt the materials that we've created is best for a successful campaign in your community. And again, this will be a topic of further discussion with Sally and Elizabeth just a little later on the call, where we talk a little bit more about the strategic implementation of these materials. The 9th and final step is to execute an evaluation of your campaign. And an evaluation can take a variety of forms and should really be part of a larger development and implementation plan that should assess if you've reached your goals. So this evaluation should recognize your successes and also help to identify if the campaign could be improved for greater effectiveness. You'll want to think about how you're tracking your outcomes. For example, how will your evaluation measure that you've reached a specific outcome that you intended? And this will be very campaign and agency specific. So before I pass it along to Sally, let's do a quick poll. Sorry, I'm trying to find the poll here. There we go. Of the 9 campaign stages that we've discussed, which excites you the most, and we didn't put evaluation on here because we knew that everyone loves evaluating. So let's actually take the first 8, 1 through 8, which are identifying the audience in your community that you want to reach, writing objectives, devising strategies, talking with the audience in your community, developing messages, getting creative, checking in with your community, and implementing strategically.
Oh, I love all the creative folks on the webinar. That's exciting.
That is exciting. I think that's probably my favorite piece of this, too, because the possibilities are so endless. Cool. Yeah, about half of the folks, looks like, are excited about getting creative. Okay, so now that we've gone over for some of the basic elements of campaign development and shared about our own process, I'd like to turn it over to Sally, and she'll be sharing a little bit more about how to strategically implement a comprehensive campaign.
Can I ask you to do one thing first?
Sure.
Just because we've had a few people through the chat. Would you mind just going through, just naming the 9 steps again?
I can. I think I went so fast I wanted to make sure we got through.
I know. You're 5 minutes ahead, so if you want to just go through them, and then I know we've had a few people that haven't been able to log into the webinar. If you could please check your inboxes and your email, you received the information about how to log in. If you're not able to get in, we'd ask you to please call the technical assistance line that's located in that email to try to log on. Sorry, or just give our office a call and we'll try to get you connected. But also know that we will be providing a full recording and access to the slides after the webinar as well. If you're able to participate in the audio, we'll try to make that as pleasing as possible to you if you're not able to get into the webinar version.
Yes, and just to let you know, that number is 1-877-739-3895, having any technical problems, and make sure that you've tested your system to make sure that you have all the necessary software and all that jazz before you're logging in. So just to quickly go over, again, the 9 stages of the campaign process, the campaign development process. Step 1 was to identify the audience in your community that you want to reach, and that was just really making sure you have a clear sense of who it is that you want to talk to, who it is that you want to reach in your community. Step 2 is to write objectives. So once you've identified your audience, you're writing some clear objectives on what you want, whether that's educating, calling for action, changing attitudes. Step 3 is to devise strategies, and that's after you now have your objectives, how will you accomplish them? Devising the strategies that will best fit your organization's resources and time frame are important to this step. The 4th step is to talk to your community, and that requires just checking in, seeing that the messages that you're hoping to share are appropriate with your community. The 5th step is to develop messages, and these messages should be based on the goals and objectives that you've identified, as well as if they're representative of the information you've learned from your target audience. And these messages will be about 3 to 5 facts that you want to convey to your community. The 6th step is getting creative, and that was identified as our most exciting point. Everyone's excited about that. And that involves getting creative as far as the development, and also getting creative with your partnerships for how you plan to, how you really plan to engage in this process. Who can you use in your community? Who can you partner with to accomplish a joint goal? How will you do it? Step 7 is going back to your community, and that's checking in with your community to make sure that the materials you've developed are appropriate and work, and doing any last little touch-ups and tweaks to make sure that it best fits. The 8th step is implementing strategically. So that's critically thinking about how you will use your campaign materials, what that's going to require of staff, or what type of training, what type of distribution, and what type of support might be necessary now that you have this campaign to make sure that it's most effective. And then the 9th step was evaluation, and that's assessing how you've reached your goals. That's celebrating your successes and identifying what you may be able to do to make it more effective in the future. So I think is that good, Sally?
Excellent. Thank you. Well, the time has now come. It's very exciting for us here. For those that don't know, we've been underwater for about a month in the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area, and luckily the printers that we work with were not flooded, and we are starting to have the actual campaign materials arrive in our office today, and we're surrounded by them, and we're so excited that we can start to share those tools with you. But what I wanted to start off to talk about is looking at what does a strategically implemented campaign look like. So Kelly talked a little bit about our process coming into this. To give you more historical background, when we started doing really customized training and technical assistance work with the Office on Violence Against Women rural grantees, heard over and over again through questions that came in for technical assistance and at the trainings that we did is folks wanted help with really trying to ramp up their outreach efforts. The number one challenge being for most communities that people just didn't want to talk about sexual violence. And so really needing to think differently about how they could do this work under that constraint of it being very scary and challenging and complicated to talk about all of the issues that are wrapped around why sexual violence perpetration happens in our communities.
So that was our first step, and then the Office on Violence Against Women approached us specifically to develop some tools for rural grantees to use. So now this is what we are going to show you, and this really is your campaign. We heard from you, and you helped us make contact with folks in your communities to find out what messages resonated with them, what they wanted some things to look like, and of course, Kelly mentioned a couple things that are important to remember. Trying to do something that works for every rural community is impossible, but we feel pretty assured that this will work for some of you, or that one piece of this campaign will hopefully be helpful. Or if nothing else, we hope that the information that we'll be posting about how to do strategic campaign development will be useful to you as you develop more of your work. So we have these tools that we're going to share, and we're so happy that so many of you that are on this call and other rural grantees that couldn't join us today but were helpful as we've been working the past year and a half, that you've had experience doing outreach and you were willing to share what you've learned with us. And in fact, some of you will see that what we heard from the general public probably looks similar or sounds similar to some campaigns that a few communities have already developed, because this is what we heard worked for people. It wasn't scary. It helped them to feel motivated. So important that we just kind of set that context and really provide this huge thank you to all of you for being part of this process with us. So without further ado, we will show you some of the images that are connected to the campaign. So this is our official unveiling of what we've been happily been calling the WEED, Public Service Announcement Project. And why I mentioned the WEED is that the central slogan that developed as we were doing testing was around communication. The goal of the project was really to find some tools that would encourage people to talk about solutions to addressing sexual violence at the community level. And many rural communities were already using messaging that focused on communication. So you'll see from the main logo, the focus is let's talk about it. And then where the WEED image comes in, we heard from the general public that when we were testing out all these different analogies and metaphors for sexual violence, people could see a connection or could relate to the concept of a weed, that sexual violence is like a weed in a few ways, that it's everywhere, it's in all of our communities, and also that if we don't do and address the weeds, that it has the potential to grow and grow and become a larger problem. So again, this is where we get the weed imagery and this main logo. Another element of the campaign is that we were targeting community members that act as community gatekeepers, that we see these people as what is called social century mavens. I don't know if people have read The Tipping Point and other books, that we have mavens in communities that really are kind of the hub of information flow. They know what's happening, when it's happening, and who's going to be there. So we really wanted to engage folks that are in those spaces already, because we know that not only are they knowledgeable, but they are influencers in their community. So through our testing, we found that most people could relate to this image of the weed and trying to stamp out the weeds, but also relate to the strategy of speaking out about sexual violence as being a positive strategy. I want to give an overview here of the campaign materials. You are going to be able to look at samples of these. Please note that there are some minor tweaks that will be happening this week. Nothing major, but the placement of some issues. There may be a couple slight color shifts to
to things and some small edits, but we wanted to make sure we had something to share with you today. We will be doing an 18 by 24 poster, a 24 by 36 poster series. We actually have developed 3 posters that depict different age groups and different settings for community conversation. Then based on what we heard from folks previously, we've also developed an 8.5 by 11 advertisement that's in black and white that could easily be used if you are given donative ad space or have general publications you're putting out. We have created stickers that I'll show you is actually done in the model of this general logo. We did create those in both English and Spanish. Kelly mentioned the window clings earlier, and that is the same as the stickers, but in English, also in English and Spanish. We also have bilingual coasters, and these are the typical coasters that you would see in a bar or a diner. They're made of hardstock paper, and we did test them out to make sure that if liquid gets on it, it does not. And lastly, we have a 30-second radio PSA and a 30-second TV PSA. We do have the radio clip. Again, it's not the final edit, but close to it, that we'll share with you today. And what you'll see here are actually the large posters that we've created. Again, we're trying to reinforce that everyone can make a difference and that having the conversation is what matters, and reiterating that everyone can talk about it. Now, what we will make available to you through our webpage are downloadable materials that you can customize, where you can put in your own taglines, you can put in your community information. And our goal with these was to highlight that conversations can happen anywhere. We will show you the next version. Again, the images that you see here are also replicated in the TV spot. We did a fabulous shot in a rural community not too far from us of this fabulous diner, and I have to say, so many people came in to eat there while we were trying to tape, and we had wonderful conversations with them, and this counter looks exactly like that counter where we were able to sit down and have those conversations with community members. Our final of the 3 posters is, again, about how we can do this in our homes with our neighbors, that we can have these conversations. So, again, this image will be repeated in the TV spot. So one thing that we wanted to focus on is that you don't have to be within the walls of a victim service provider office in order to talk about sexual violence, and your conversations don't always need to be focused on victimization, but can be focused on what the community can do to make change, and that is the focus of all of our work. We will be sharing the website for everyone in a few slides. Thank you for being excited about what you're seeing so far. And these may be hard for everyone to see since we've put the 3 on here, but this is what we've developed. When we heard from so many people that they often receive calls from local organizations and partners that they want to put in ads, here are some ready-made ads for folks that are in black and white, which are certainly more cost-effective. And here is what you will find for the stickers, window clings, and coasters. And again, the great thing about us being able to create the campaign and then you can adapt them is you can add all of your contact information to these. One thing that we heard through the pilot testing, and also from additional research that we did, folks really love something they can take away. So certainly the stickers, window pins, and coasters are helpful. We weren't able to accommodate some requests that people had to have the tear-off strips on a poster, but one option that in this campaign, because the art is free to you, you can take it to a printer and have them, put this information on a small tablet with your phone number, so people could take notepads, you could put it on Post-it notes, you could use this logo really on anything that you wanted, and could even do some printing in-house. And I would like to give you the very brief 30-second spot. We will provide on our website the script for that, and there will be at least 6 seconds where you will be able to add on your own individual tagline at the end. One thing in our process, we had a couple things where we couldn't make a decision, and so on this, you will hear the narrator say at the end, "Let's talk about it," and then also say, "How will you talk about it?" We did decide on Monday that we are just going to use the "Let's talk about it" in the PSA. So please excuse that we didn't have time to edit that here, but just imagine that that last second and a half doesn't exist, and imagine your beautiful voices in there to add in your tagline. And here we go.
Wait for the silence, and then it starts slowly coming its way up and around. So we built here on our camp. It happens every day. And what such a violence line, silence stuff. We use our voice and have a positive conversation. They can stop the problem from going on. Such a violence threat, silence. Talk about it. Oh, you talk about it.
And we're sorry that some people couldn't hear that as we just played it. It will be up on our website for you to listen to download as well. So we will, again, be sending that out to you soon. So here is the URL for the web page where we will have all of the information that we've shared with you here, plus all the downloadable materials and camera-ready art that you can share with printers or have some folks in-house work with, as well as our team here has been collecting a lot of technical assistance materials, including we have developed a style and standards guide about how to use the logos and the materials. So right now you'll see a holding page up on our website. If you go to this today, we will send out one of our Just Rural e-newsletters to let everyone know when all of the final content has been added, and we expect for that to be within the next few weeks. A few things to note is related to customizing campaign tools. I will say right off the bat that if you haven't done this before, you're probably not going to remember what you hear right now. We will be providing instructions about how to do this customization both in Adobe Illustrator and in Microsoft Word. We are available to you after the webinar,
and once you go to our website to see things posted to help you with that. But there are a lot of different options. You can use Illustrator, or if you're working with a printer who uses Adobe, using the selection and type tools and editing text to add in where you see this red box here at the bottom of logo to add in your specific information. Microsoft Word is much more common that we're all using, and so it's possible that you can put this in the logo into a Word document and do editing that way. So expect a lot more information, and we can help you if you're having any problems with customization. So the one thing you didn't see was the TV spot, but we will have that for you soon to take a look at. Wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about implementing the campaign. And if I could ask folks to just share with me, if you could, answer this poll about if you think that you have the resources to implement a campaign in your community right now. Thank you, folks, for responding. I'm glad that people see that they're somewhat ready. And we have 10 folks that are absolutely ready to jump in, and a few folks that are maybe on the fence there if they're ready. I think that readiness is really important when you're thinking about being strategic and implementing a campaign. It's really important for you to think about what doing a campaign would mean for you, for your organization, and for your. I know this is overused, but it's really important to think of the mantra of if we build it, they will come. So if you're putting out more messaging, knowing if you will have the capacity to respond. Because one of the most tragic things that happens is when people reach out because they've been asked to and aren't able to receive what they need. So really critical to use those fabulous steps in that process that Kelly talked about, which I know a lot of you are already doing, and so excited that there's so much creativity in this group of people. I think because you've had to be creative over the years. But the other element that I would put that's the overarching piece around all of this is around how a campaign would support a programmatic element that you already have happening or that you want to have happen, and making sure that you have that internal capacity to launch that effectively. I'll give you an example. I think that a question just came in maybe around engaging bystanders. Engaging men. A lot of the work around engaging men has been looking at a bystander intervention approach. And I remember working with a lot of programs as the bystander models first became really exciting and folks were interested in that. We had a lot of bystanders that called our office who had reached out to programs locally that didn't know what to do with people that had called before violence had happened. And now, this is 10 years later, we're in a very different place. Most of our programs are working with significant others. They're doing a lot of bystander education programming. But again, that was something new that folks had started to do but really hadn't done the capacity work internally. So one thing we want you to think about is if you look at the options of the campaign, really take that time internally, see, does it support something that you're already developing?
Is there something in the works? Is there a program? Is there a project? Is your rural grant focused on outreach? Does this help you meet those goals? If it doesn't, that's okay. It will be here at a later time for you. But if it does, then you can think about which pieces of the campaign might work considering your target audience. If you don't have a lot of people that are in their cars in your area and an auto dealer that maybe you can partner with, maybe the radio spot and the decal sticker are not going to be the things that you would prioritize. But one thing that we did hear over and over again is that folks do spend a lot of time in their cars and that the radio spots may be a really easy and exciting way to engage people. And then there are, lastly, just a few questions I want to pose to everyone to think about, and feel free to share any answers in the chat feature, but just to really take the time to look at what the current messages already are in your community. One thing that we are trying to do, and what we did do with this campaign, is we did make it something that can connect with the National Sexual Assault Awareness Month campaign, because we know about the rules that Kelly talked about earlier, and we didn't want to put conflicting messaging out that, so they work well together, and the SAM campaign materials will be available for folks very soon as well. And then thinking about your priority audience, and this is where picking a specific product of the campaign would be important. If you are developing something for a specific campus community, that might mean that you would pick different options within the campaign. And then having a specific plan to engage your audience, and as Kelly said, to really get them involved in the planning and the implementation, especially about how you get feedback to know if you've been successful. And it's important to know what your goals are to start, and you may change those as you move along, but that's a way that we can keep checking in and making sure that we are staying on track with what the priorities in our community are. I'd like to finish with just a quick poll, knowing that you've just had a few minutes to look at the tools, but if folks wouldn't mind letting me know which, so far, just with your initial sense, which tools do you think will be most helpful to you in achieving your goals? Looks like we have a tie so far. Oh, there we go. Well, I'm glad that we did 3 poster options instead of our initial one, and we're grateful to OVW that they allowed us to increase that as we were developing. Okay, that's great. Thank you so much for doing that. I'm glad that the ads seem to be worthwhile, and we look forward to getting more feedback from everyone about the TV spot once you see it. One other thing to think about is implementing campaign in stages and thinking about maybe some short-term initial goals. Is it that you want people to be able to recognize your office as a place to reach out to first? Then you may focus on maybe launching the radio and then following up maybe the next year with doing more around the print materials, and then moving on as you gain a better understanding of what works in your community. So we really encourage you to use the materials as you see fit, and feel like you can really customize and make them work for your community needs. I do want to just share one quick story to see how folks have, how one individual actually implemented a campaign in their rural community. This example is actually about implementing the National Sexual Assault Awareness Month campaign, but I think very easily, and actually more easily, the rural PSA project could be implemented. There was a situation in this community where one of the elders in a faith community had a parishioner disclose that he had sexually assaulted another parishioner. And so when we were contacted, there was a long list of things that this community decided they wanted to do. First, they wanted to make sure to open up dialogue because they were afraid that this may split the community and make the church, or the church wasn't a safe place at that time. So they wanted to address safety issues and start communication. So they used campaign materials that focused on talking, just to get an event in April happening. Then additional materials were used to meet with the council that was doing policy development, where they sat down again and took the information that came from the dialogues that happened during April, and they actually brought in the bystander intervention materials that were part of that campaign and talked about how to implement a safety check process to make sure people knew how to intervene, when to intervene, and that there would be accountability and support for people who did that type of intervention. From that, they were able to develop a full-scale policy about preventing and responding to sexual violence in their faith community. And then their next work was completely done collaboratively with the local Rape Crisis Center as they started these conversations. And again, something important that you all already know, when we start these dialogues, people tend to disclose about abuse. And after the dialogues, they had at least a third of their congregation disclose about childhood sexual assault experiences. So they worked with the local Rape Crisis Center to actually develop a support group that was housed in their church and co-facilitated between a member of the church who went through the volunteer training at that Rape Crisis Center and one of their traditional facilitators that was on staff, and they did that weekly for 6 years, and then that led into a volunteer program between the church community and the Rape Crisis Center, which is another issue that we've heard from grantees about being able to maintain volunteers. So just a brief piece about how different campaign materials, they brought in posters, they brought in resources. They showed the PSA that we had in Times Square to their communities to kind of get people excited. So there are lots of ways that we can get people invested. And now I will turn it back over to Kelly, and then we will hear about some great news from our current rural grantee.
Yeah, so thanks, Sally. Just to continue on the topic of strategic implementation, I know Sally went over some of the strategies that others have used, and we thought it was so important to get Elizabeth involved in this, who she was a part of our initial testing of the messages, of the products we were thinking about developing with this campaign. We were just really excited to keep her to be able to talk with all of us about the strategic implementations that she envisions happening within her own agency and community. And from just talking with Elizabeth sorry. I was just talking a little bit with Elizabeth briefly. She's been so excited about learning how others are going to do this process too. So no further ado, Elizabeth, whenever you're ready, if you want to share, we're ready for you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Am I unmuted and able to be heard?
You are.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you guys so much for inviting me to be a part of this afternoon. I just want to remind everybody that as I'm sharing, anything that comes to your mind, any thoughts, any questions, please share them in the question and answer tab. I'm going to talk about the things that we're really excited about doing here with these materials. We had the benefit and the opportunity to be a part of the focus group in developing these products, and so we've had a little head start on getting ideas on how we're going to use them. So I'm really excited about sharing this. The fact that they're both in English and Spanish is really huge in our community, and I want to start talking about that. Our community has a rather large Hispanic population, and so coming out of the gate with Spanish materials is just so fabulous. So I want to talk about first how we're going to use just the materials in general, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about specifically some different things that we're going to do with the Spanish material. In general, and these are just things that will work in our community really well. We want to get these materials out in front of as many people as possible. This rule of 27, I want to come out of the gate getting these materials in front of as many people as possible. And we found that just talking, you know, here we are, the material saying, let's talk about it. Talking, striking up the conversation wherever you are is the best way to get the conversation started. And then you find really quickly that people that you least expect to become one of your partners or one of your allies in this sort of campaign to get people talking about sexual assault and sexual violence are sometimes your best allies, the ones that you least expect it to be. Just recently, I was getting some work done on my car, and I started talking to the owner of the garage, and he's an elderly gentleman. He has had this particular garage here in the community for 40-plus years. We started talking, and he immediately invited me, as soon as he found out what I did, he immediately invited me to bring any information that I want to leave in his garage, for instance. So I've already got one place that he's saying, you know, bring this here. But other places, anywhere people gather, anywhere people go is a good place to have these materials available. Restaurants, bars. My gym is willing to put up posters, the large posters, in their bathrooms, in the locker rooms. Grocery stores. That's sometimes it's just a matter of asking. Coffee shops, cafes. This is sort of a natural place where people are already talking. So let's give them some motivation to talk about this subject while they're there talking. Schools. We've been doing a lot of work in our local school system, and especially in the high school. And again, they've agreed to allow us to put posters in every bathroom, to also have some of these takeaways available throughout the school, in strategic locations throughout the school, in the counselor's office and other places throughout the school, that students can take this information away with them. And we have, several times a year, we have displays in the school for full days where we have tables and talk to the kids for the full day, and so we're going to have these materials available there as well. Churches, we've already talked about the churches. I think that in our community, and we have a lot of churches, most rural communities do. Again, it's about asking. It's about just opening the door and saying, this is what I do, and here's some materials that I'd love to leave with you, and maybe say, how do you think you could best? Which of these materials might work best in your church community, or with whomever you're talking? Ask them, I'd love to be able to leave some of these or display some of these here. Which ones do you think would be most appropriate for your environment? Which ones do you think would be most effective in your environment? And then as far as other ways, we have some of the print materials. There's always free newsletters, and lots of different organizations. The apartment communities often have newsletters. Organizations have newsletters. Sometimes neighborhoods have newsletters. Again, it's just about asking, can I run, would you be willing to run this, small print ad in your organization's newsletter? And they may even be willing to, I know in our community, one of the things that I ask and often works is to say, can we run this with maybe just a small article about what our organization, some of our successes this month or that type of thing. I come from a business background, so I approach what I do like it's business, and I am really interested in building my community partners and my sphere of influence, because whoever is going to be your best ally, and then you want to get them excited so that they're talking to people to their sphere of influence, people they know for this type of assistance in displaying these materials. And before you know it, you've made those 27 touches and gotten your message in front of people many, 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 many times. I do a lot of presentations to community organizations. Sometimes they're very brief. Sometimes it's just, would you take 5 minutes and share about what your organization does? And, again, you can give them some of these takeaways or just, have some of the materials on display during that time. I want to talk about, in our community, we have I mentioned that our community is actually it's about 52% Hispanic. And so the Spanish materials are extremely important in our community. And I think that where they're going to see the materials in these other locations, there are some really strategic ways to get these Spanish materials in front of the Spanish-speaking community. One way is through festivals. In our community, we have a lot of festivals and soccer tournaments and things like that. And it's so easy. It's usually just a matter of saying, hey, can I set up a table during that event and give out these materials? And so that's something that we plan on doing a lot. And again, going to the Hispanic churches. We also, through our agency, do a door-to-door campaign twice a year where we create bags that we hand out in our Hispanic community. And we give out about 1,000 of these bags. And we have other community partners who want to put advertising in Spanish or information in Spanish. Most of the information that we include is information about how to access community resources like health resources, anything that would be of value and of interest to this community. And this is a wonderful place to include some of this information. Also, we have Spanish radio stations. So these and oftentimes they'll be at these festivals and these events broadcasting. And I don't know at this point if we're going to have any of the radio spots in Spanish, but I know that we are working on one ourselves here that's very similar to use during those things as well. I think I've just about covered everything that we're planning to do right away. But I'd love for, do we have any questions or any input at this point about how you might do that in your community?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, we're actually going to move in just a second over to questions and thoughts from all of the participants on today's call.
Great.
Thank you for sharing. We were excited to hear some of your ideas and some of the things we've been talking about how we thought they might be useful, but to hear some of your strategies and just talking about the sphere of influence and how you can make creative partnerships, that's all exciting stuff, and thank you for sharing on that. So we're going to unmute the lines in just a second, and are interested in hearing your ideas, thoughts, questions, and in general, we're just interested in learning more about how we can help with the implementation of these campaign tools. So we'll unmute the lines here in a second, and we encourage you to just chime in, let us know what you're thinking. You can also send some questions via the question and answer tab if you're interested in doing so that way, and hopefully we can learn more about your thoughts on the campaign. So hold on one second, and we'll unmute.
All attendees have been unmuted.
Okay, we've unmuted the lines at this point, so if you have a question or comment, just stating your name and letting us know.
Hello.
Hello, do we have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question.
Do you mind telling us your name?
Yeah, my name's Tatiana Bordakovsky. I work with I'm a program coordinator for domestic violence and sexual assault advocacy. And I was wondering if the Sexual Violence Thrives in Silence campaign, they're going to be available for purchase on your website?
All of the materials are available for free for rural grantees.
That's our money.
We are printing up samples that we will send you, and then we've tried to make the materials for download also something that won't be that cost prohibitive if you're able to find a printer or even use printing that you may have available in your office. So all of the campaign materials are free, the radio PSA, the TV spots, and all of the coasters. We just aren't able to provide mass quantities of the print materials for you, just a sampling, and then we invite you to try to find partners that can help you find low-cost ways to make reproductions of them.
And again, those are the types of things that, should you, as you're accessing materials at a later date, if you run into any troubleshooting, we encourage you to, get in touch with us and let us know if you're wondering about the best way to use it or what types of resources or what to look for. We realize that we only have an hour and a half for today's webinar, and so some of that information that we know might be helpful, we didn't necessarily get to cover today. So if you have more thoughts afterwards or questions, we hope you'll follow up. Do we have any other questions, thoughts, or ideas?
I'd like to comment. My name is Claire Fry from the Attorney General's office in the state of Nevada.
Hi, Claire. Go ahead.
Hi. Okay. I just want to thank you for being so thorough and for giving us all of this wonderful information and basically giving us a formula so that we can take, either things you've developed or things we can now develop. and how many times we need to get them out in front of people so that it's effective. And I mean, I think all of this information is so wonderful. When you make it available, I would like to forward it to all of our, and we have a lot of rural grantees for our FAWA grants. And they're always looking for technical assistance, and how outreach is huge, because in the state of Nevada we have so many frontier areas where it's basically one person per acre. So when you say rural, it's really rural. And there's like hundreds of miles in between services and resources. So, so I just want to say thank you for this webinar today. I think it's been absolutely fabulous.
Well, thank you. We're excited to hear it. This has been such an exciting process for us to go through the development of these things. It was a new process for us in many ways, and so we were very fortunate to work with some, rural grantees as testing sites, and then so glad that you're all on the call today. We're glad to hear that the feedback is good.
Sally, we will send out an official evaluation where we hope that people will talk about the good and the bad. But what we might be able to do, if there are communities that do think they're going to try to use the tool, we could set up a conference call with those folks that plan on using it.
Ooh, that would be wonderful.
Because I think, we learned so much about what not to do over the past year with all of your help, and I'm sure that you all have a lot to teach us and other grantees. So that's something we can definitely set up to keep the peer-to-peer technical assistance going.
Oh, okay.
And do we have any other questions or comments?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, this is Diane Harmon. I'm calling from Domestic Violence Crisis Center in Minot, North Dakota. And my question is, I heard you say, how will you talk about it, and then you decided not to use that. But I wonder if you have any, one-liners. It says your voice is powerful, start the conversation. So I'm wondering, do you have any, just one-liners or something that actually does start the conversation? You know what I mean? Or if you've got any.
Yeah, we have those lead-ins on the print materials.
Okay.
And in the 30-second spot, we did go with the let's talk about it kind of as the final concluding spot. If there are other things you think might be helpful, you're welcome to send that to us.
Yeah, okay.
For future things. And we do have the ability to help folks create audio podcasts. If that's something that you think would be helpful in your community too, we could help you really craft something that you want to say.
Yeah, wonderful.
Actually, Sally, we just received a question that says, along with the one-liners, what about some daily tweets and or Facebook posts for each day in April? So I like this. We're thinking about the Sexual Assault Awareness Month campaign.
And we were planning on that for SAM, and I love the idea of us doing a tailored version for all of you that will help with utilization of the campaign. What a great idea. Sherry, thank you. So I don't know if everyone is familiar with our SAM campaign, but we have found that the use of social media like Twitter and Facebook has been very helpful in doing promotion and getting people's attention and buy-in, and also a thing to give them to do. I know last year what we did is we asked people, there was a clock symbol for SAM, and we asked people to change their profile picture to holding a clock. And we could do something similar for this campaign, or at least we could do a size of the logo well for a profile picture, and folks could be sharing that and asking people to post it so that you could customize your info too. So great ideas.
And one more question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
The 27 rule, the rule of 27, I just was wondering a resource for that so I can, because I want to use that. But is that from the sticking point or?
Sticking point? Well, we've heard it specifically referenced through Kelly Ottie's presentation, and I apologize that I didn't get that original source. I would like to think that Kelly just came up with that, but I'm not sure that she did. So we can include that in our online materials. We'll definitely follow up and provide that with the information when it's available in October.
Great information. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Do we have other questions or comments? Any other thoughts?
Excuse me, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you tell me your name?
Yes, my name is Dorothy Givens, and I am the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Coordinator for a shelter in Columbus, Mississippi. And I just want to say that this information that we are receiving today is very helpful, and especially I didn't think about putting up the posters and tear-offs in the bathrooms at the school, and that's a great idea, and I cannot wait until this information is made available for us to use.
Well, thank you, Dorothy. Yeah, we're excited about all the possibilities of being able to use the materials too. So.
And we're very excited that I hope that by the third week of October, depending on where you are, I'm hoping that the post will exist, and we'll be able to get everything to you. But we will send out an email alert letting you know when we mail them, and the day that we mail them, we'll have everything up on the website, so you can go and take a look at that first, and then you can actually see what things look like in life-size form. So if you're not signed up for our Just Rural e-newsletter, please go to our website and sign up for that so we make sure we don't miss you when we send out the alert.
All right, great.
Do we have other questions or comments?
This is Diane from North Dakota again. Do they have they announced what the SAM campaign is going to be this year? Are you?
That is going to be announced very soon.
Okay.
So we will include that information in the alert we send out to you so that you can be thinking comprehensively about how this might connect with something that you plan to do for Sexual Assault Awareness Month.
Perfect.
Notice that I think it will work very well together.
Great, thank you.
Of the SAM campaign, I will tell you, is around healthy sexuality.
Yeah, perfect.
So that's a little bit different focus, but certainly works with having healthy communication.
Yep, prevention. Yeah, thank you.
Do we have other questions or comments?
Well, we're just thrilled that folks seem to think that elements will be useful. We are excited to see about how you will use them, and we will work really hard to try to keep us all connected about that over the next several months.
Yes, so again, I'd like to thank everyone for participating today. Thank you, Elizabeth, for being a part of this journey with us, and for all the other sites that have been involved, and for just being on today's call. We encourage you as you access these materials and think about how you're going to strategically implement them. We encourage you to reach out with any questions. We're excited in helping you with this process and learning with you as you engage in sharing these with your communities. So I think that's all we have today. My contact information is available on the slide. My email is kwilt@nsvrc.org. And again, my name is Kelly. So please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Otherwise, we'll be sending out evaluations at a later date.
Yeah, we'll send that out within the next week.
So we encourage your thoughts then. So thank you so much for participating in today's call, and we hope you have a great afternoon or evening wherever you're at.
You too.
Thank you.